お座り。
Doesn't looking at that just make you feel so old? We opened this new series with a few really nice establishing shots before we met our new lead cure of the season. No, not this redhead named Iroha, who actually had some of the usual design cues of a typical pink lead, and even says the series' catchphrase, but rather the dog.
Oh, okay. What?
I mean, it was already spoiled to us through the promo material, and even the opening for those who didn't read that stuff. That said, I will say, it might have been interesting if they hadn't spoiled that stuff ahead of time, and just given us the old bait and switch by making it seem like Iroha was going to be the lead cure. That actually would have worked in the context of this show, but whatever, there are some solid narrative reasons why they didn't bother doing that, and it's probably just me being obsessed with my twists. Hey, just be glad it wasn't Bond. We then got the opening for the show, which, yeah.
No, sir, I don't like it.
Putting aside some of the quote-unquote action that we'll talk more about in the episode proper, the song itself, Wonderful Precure, was very mid, and that's me being polite. I don't know, for me, the tune just doesn't have any real pizzazz, as it almost religiously just sticks to one melody with little variants throughout. Meanwhile, the visuals overall were just kind of weak. Again, putting aside the action, just the general character movements felt stiff, especially for an opening where they should be putting their best foot forward. Now, to be fair, some of the cuts did look better than others, like this bit between the secondary Cure team of the show, who also had some interesting foreshadowing with whatever's going on here. Oh yeah, for this season, while they'll all likely join up later, much like with the Hirogaru Sky team, you can easily split these four members into two pairings for reasons that we'll get into in the show proper. But all around, just an underwhelming opening, especially compared with all the other openings that we've gotten in the Reiwa era so far. Anyway, after Iroha took her pooch with a very on-the-nose birthmark named Komugi out for a walk, she returned home where her dad was making breakfast, and then, oh look, another super swole Papa Cure. I guess I picked the right shirt for this year. Then again, considering that he does have the same VA as Chongie, I guess it checks out that he would already commit to core days. Anyway, Iroha didn't have time for breakfast, as she was late for volleyball practice, so she had to rush out, much to Komugi's dismay. Yeah, just give her a treat and run out the door as fast as you can. I mean, just look at how they do it in Resident Evil. No, instead, they did this little knockoff Forza handshake that will actually be used cleverly later in the episode, but still, it ended up being her mom holding the pooch back that let her go. With her master gone, we did get, admittedly, a kind of sad scene of Komugi already missing her. Granted, a lot of the heavy lifting of the scene was being done by the music, that I'll say right now, we're just getting more bangers from Erika Fukusawa. That said, I did like this dream sequence in which Komugi was already imagining her human form, just so that she could spend more time with Iroha. It especially delivered a nice emotional concerto where they went from holding hands to suddenly switching to the leash to really represent how much Komugi actually hated that thing, like I'd imagine most dogs would, as it represented a significant barrier between an owner and their pet. Good visual storytelling and direction, so major kudos. Anyway, we also got, thankfully, some actual hinting at the villains of the season, with some animal fairies turning into some future monsters of the week. Sure, it didn't tell us much other than that this rock had something to do with it, but at least they're clearly building to something, and it felt legit foreboding. Back with Komugi, her owner had returned, and they decided to go out for another walk. Along the way, they met with a boy named Satoru and his pet rabbit, Daifuku, and the pet owners were very close friends.
同じクラスになれたらもっともっと話せるでしょ。
そうだね。
Written by Yoshimi Narita. I mean, okay, he's clearly around her age, so nothing questionable just yet, unless some older gentleman sticks his head in, which, yeah, knowing the writer of the show, it's only a matter of time. For now, though, Satoru did help to establish some seemingly significant lore with this big rock that didn't look quite as punchable as the one Sora split, called the Mirror Stone. That said, and even if there isn't going to be an older guy involved, I'm just kind of over with this whole will they won't they sort of nonsense in Precure. Same, Pooch, same. We then cut over to yet another branch of the freaking pre-holic because that cow still needs to be milked. And also, yet again, a future cure was the daughter of the owner named Mayu and her pet cat Yuki. Yeah, the two sub-teens of this season were going to be divided based on this whole pet and owner dynamic. Kind of interesting, though I will admit, I kind of like these two a little more than Komugi and Iroha, if only because they had a more interesting dynamic. As while the dog pair was almost too much alike, this cat pair were almost polar opposites, with Mayu being a bit of a shut-in, and her cat telling her to socialize more. That's both cute, and generates a lot of character, especially through Yuki's pretty amazing faces here. You'd almost think she hung out with Yukari or something, and let's forget that ever happened. Anyway, Iroha and Komugi hung out at the park, where of course trouble was a-brewing. Oh, not from this obviously evil Easter egg, but rather just the fact that Beethoven was loose. Seriously, that dog got away with way too much. While playing catch, Komugi stumbled upon something other than her rubber ball.
石まん丸でキラキラしてる。
Collect 7 of those, and you should be able to make a wish by next year. Sure enough, a monster called the Gar wanted that wish, and took on the form of one of those sheep from Catherine. FYI, we were thinking of referencing a different goat, but yeah, we decided not to. Everyone tried to evacuate, but as I said, Beethoven just had to inconvenience its owner, so Iroha again did the most Precure thing possible, and was the first to try and help, which just makes me wonder why she wasn't immediately chosen as a cure, especially if she's just gonna get her powers next week. But no, instead, the Dragon Ball, or rather the Mirror Stone Shard, played favorites and went with the admittedly brave dog. Nah, that actually would have been a cool development, but instead what we got was... Well, may as well get this meme out of the way.
Shut up, dear furry!
Anyway, actual transformation sequence time, and
it's gone.
yeah, for a Precure transformation sequence, and especially the lead cure, this was kind of short, and as a result, a little underwhelming. I mean, on the one hand, I kind of low-key appreciate a shorter sequence, and am certainly not expecting another barrage of amazing sequences following frickin' Hero Sky, but yeah, other than this kind of clever bit of the foreground borders actually forming a few of Komugi's ribbons, it's just kind of there. Again, appreciate that it's not being overly indulgent, but it also could have just used a little more sauce. We then got our first fight of the season, and yes, I'm making the biggest air quotes possible, as other than this one shield bash at the start, Komugi didn't land a single actual hit on this angry goat, and instead just chased it until it was too exhausted to continue. Yeah, as many deciphered from the opening, this season is likely not going to have any hand-to-hand combat, you know, the thing that made this franchise stand out. Hell, I'd argue it's even less than Kira, as at least restraints are some form of combat, rather than just letting the enemy essentially defeat itself. Though honestly, even before I saw the opening, I was kind of expecting that Precure would start going in this direction, and now that they are, well, all I'll say is that I have other things I can review. Anyway, she healed the animal through a hug, which I'm pretty sure was more of a thing with a few other seasons, and the episode ended with Iroha learning that her dog had learned a few new tricks. The ending theme for the show was pretty much the polar opposite of the opening in that, yeah, I actually really like this one. I mean, not only was Fun Wonderful Days just a way catchier tune with a lot more variety in its melodies, the dance sequence was very well choreographed and put together with some interesting stage-changing gimmicks. It's certainly not top tier like Maho or Healing Good, but a definite upper tier material for me, and maybe even my top 10, I have to look back. With all that said, I do have to disagree with Iroha here, and say that this was just an okay first episode. I mean, my issues with the fight aside, I do have to give credit for some nicely put together scenes and some pretty strong character building, which is something Narita can excel at as long as she's not distracted by some needless romance subplots. But yeah, if most of the show's battles are mostly just going to be chases rather than actual fisticuffs, I'm probably not going to stick around after the first month. As I've said, 2023 kind of burnt me out on this franchise, and while the first episode didn't really offend me in any way, it also didn't do anything to really reignite my excitement for this franchise. Aside from the twist that Komugi became the lead cure of the season, this was a fairly standard first episode of the season, which I say is neither really a pro or con. I mean, for one thing, it is understandable since it was written by one of the longest running writers of this franchise, and it is a solid enough formula to at least get us interested in these characters. For instance, even though she didn't talk for most of this episode, be it Pooch and everything, Komugi did get some decent character building with her legit well-directed dream sequence. Meanwhile, her owner in Iroha was very amiable and acted almost too much like an actual Precure lead, but at least she established herself as being worthy of the second cure, even though again, I think that stupid rock was clearly playing favorites. Meanwhile, the other duo got a good introduction as polar opposites that actually does make me want to see more of them. And while nothing too interesting has been set up in regards to the Garugarus, it at least hinted at more to come. But yeah, that's kind of my main issue. There's a lot of setup, and yet nothing is really grasping me other than kind of the cat pair. I mean, I'm certainly not sold on the show's choice in battles, even if it did have some nicely animated sequences that I think were done by Ida Hanao, who is listed as one of the animation directors of this episode. And it's not even just a lack of fisticuffs, but more that I just can't see a lot of good dramatic tension in these battles if there's no sense of danger. It's either going to be the Cure's dodging or chasing monsters, which I just can't imagine as being all that exciting or grasping. Maybe they could pull some sorts of tricks to make it interesting and not repetitive, but I'm not canceling those reservations. Again, I didn't hate it, but it's just not giving me a whole lot of reasons to stick around. And overall, while this episode had some interesting moments that even worked around its main character not being able to talk through most of it, it's also not selling me that much on its premise and probably won't hook me in with its fights. Thank you for watching what will likely be one of the last few weekly Precure reviews that we do for this channel, at least this year. Again, we'll give the show a 4-episode test, and if it doesn't win us over, we'll probably switch over to reviewing something else weekly, and regulate Precure to just shorts. Time will tell, but really, let's not hold our breaths after this episode. Still, do look forward to whatever comes next, and until then though, farewell for now my friends, and... How did you get your muzzle off?